In today's video, we're going to be updating you guys on that major upcoming snowstorm where the models have yesterday kind of fallen apart, where they've gone in separate directions. Today, they've actually come together and we're seeing a little bit more of some agreement there, which is very, very good news to see in a situation like this, especially when we're only about 3 or 4 days out. That's definitely what I like to see here. So we're going to be breaking that down. Of course, we're also going to go over the upcoming pattern as a whole for things that are a little bit further out. So I'm very excited to talk about all of that with you guys today. Let's just dive into things, and we're taking a look here at our European model. We always start out with this one because it's the best. That's probably, for the most part, why. And it's a little bit of a quieter day. I mean, we do have some thunderstorms and showers happening across the deeper south, creeping into some of the plains there and some of the southeast. It's a pretty wide area, actually. And then we have these flurries and snowfall showers happening across the northwest into the northern Rockies and even extending down into some of the kind of mid-Rockies, I guess you could call it. As we reach towards Saturday, though, here tomorrow on the 10th, we can see that there is a lot of snowfall happening over the Four Corner states. A little bit heavier here is what we've seen happen is we still have a trough kind of digging southward and then really rapidly kind of going up here over the east. So what we see is some warmer, more humid air working its way up the eastern states here. And this also comes alongside a lot of precipitation. Again, warmer temperatures, humid air, usually accompanied by showers and thunderstorms. So that is what we're seeing. We talked about this about a week ago or maybe a little bit more, but we are creeping slowly towards the springtime. So obviously as we reach late February into March and eventually April, things will look more and more thunderstormy, if you will, with the increase in humidity, increase in temperatures, and more of these sudden bursts of warmth up the eastern states really is what's going to bring that influx of those thunderstorm threats. So we're already seeing the beginning signs of that. Obviously, it's intermingled with cool downs that come down and bring back winter, but we're already seeing that battle kind of happening between the warmth and the cold. We've seen it all year, of course, as there hasn't been very consistent cold air, but we're seeing a little bit more of it, I guess I should say, here in the midpoint or the early to midpoint of February than we were before. Let's take this towards Sunday, and we see that there is an organized low developing over eastern Texas. We've been talking about this for a few days. This is also accompanied by a higher pressure, warmer air mass over the western states, and we call this a positive PNA. That stands for Pacific North American Oscillation. What this does is it really causes a surge northward here over the west, and this causes a lot of cold air to have to spill down eastward of this kind of warmer air mass. And this is a classic pattern. Honestly, if you've been watching the videos for a long time, I've talked about this a lot here over the past year or two, and positive PNA, negative PNA has been one of the top indicators of what the pattern will be like in the central and eastern states and even in the west. So it's probably, for me, one of the most important short-range teleconnections, if not the most important, and it really dictates where the storms go and really how cold or warm it's going to be, which is the two main important things really that most people are concerned about. We see this low really moves northward here into the Ohio Valley. Again, we're watching for a track, something like this from eastern Texas up into the Appalachian area. What we see is it's going to transfer offshore a little bit here. Very classic stuff. And then it's actually going to continue its northward kind of trajectory here. So it just does this little slide to the east here and then straight up the coast, almost on the same trajectory, just a couple hundred miles further eastward. This right here, these arrows, is almost what we've seen with every major snowstorm, or plowable snowstorm, I should say, in the eastern states this year. So definitely that also, as I mentioned multiple times yesterday and the day before, bodes well for my confidence. When we're seeing something that's similar to what we've seen so far over the past couple of months, that's definitely in line with my thinking as far as what's the most likely outcome. Obviously, there's long-range patterns that we get stuck in, and we are kind of stuck in one, although there is some ups and downs with it. Most things are still pretty similar to how they were a month or two ago, so this is a pretty likely outcome. Now, we saw that slide to the right here, and what we're seeing is heavy snowfall developing after it transfers to the east here, offshore of the mid-Atlantic. Pretty much offshore of New Jersey. It's just to the east of New Jersey, just to the south of Long Island there. And what's interesting is with a lot of these, we've seen kind of this very horizontal look where we see a lot of snowfall, from a kind of a west to east basis, or axis, I should say. But in this one, what we can see is the low is located here. We actually get this very kind of vertical look to it. It's not perfectly vertical, of course, it's more like diagonal. But we see from West Virginia up through Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, and into southern New England, it's pretty vertical compared to what we've seen before. So that is the main difference, I would say, that we're seeing here from the models versus what we've seen over months past. And definitely a very heavy event. 983 is a very major snowstorm, so this is going to have a lot of moisture to work with. As we take this towards later on Tuesday, so that was kind of the morning time, we see it's going to come to an end around the late afternoon into the early evening with some leftover snowfall for kind of the eastern half of New England there. Now, we will take a look at the total snowfall, of course, and we also will take a look at the GFS's projection in just a minute. I want to take you into the extended period because what we end up seeing is colder air prevailing in the east kind of continuously. It's not deep. It's not moving all the way down to the deeper south states or anything. But for these kind of middle areas of the eastern states northward, we do see some pretty brutal cold air here. And another thing to note is the prominent factor here is this high pressure kind of positive PNA look in the southwest. This is what's continuing to keep this Arctic air mass centered over the eastern states, and it's also keeping these storms moving above that southwest area or underneath, which this frame is a perfect example of that. You can see how it's dry there within that high pressure area, and to the north and south of it we can see where the two jet streams are. The northern jet up here pulling in some snowfall to the northwest and through the northern Rockies, and then this southern Pacific jet, all rainfall down there, pushing through Mexico, Texas, and that's also kind of meeting up with this northern jet. And that's what's kind of bringing these snowstorms. It's meeting up and they're combining somewhere in this area. And that is where it's all happening. I had about like 7 arrows pointed at the same place there. So that looked pretty intense. As we keep going here, we do see that we get a pretty minor snowstorm. I think the problem here is we get very deep cold here around the Saturday, Sunday time frame. And this storm gets suppressed pretty far to the south. We need this to really be able to get involved with this northern jet in order to see a major snowstorm from it. And I don't really think we get that here. As you can see, it really becomes a little bit of a rain snow event for areas pretty far south, but a situation like this would likely be, under 3 inches of snowfall if something like this was to occur. And I say likely because anything is possible. However, I don't think the cold is reaching far enough to the south, and I don't think this low is coming far enough north. One or the other could happen, and we could see a snowstorm, or both, of course. They could meet in the middle, but we're not really seeing a connection there like we would need to in order to see this really, really come together. Afterwards, what we see is that, we're left here on Monday the 19th at the end of the model run. There's still some high pressure in here, still some warmth, so this should keep bringing the cold air to the east, so it won't be done by this point, I don't believe. We're going to have more storms to talk about, even one already taking place for the plains, so we will watch for that over the coming days as we get further and further updates from these models. Now, the GFS model, let's walk through this, and what we see happen is, again, eastern Texas up through the Ohio Valley. We see it transfer offshore. This is the transfer happening, so we see very early on Tuesday the 13th. Look at how it just slides eastward there offshore. It kind of like does a little skid where it's kind of on this perfect trajectory, and then it just slips to the east, and then it's just going to keep moving kind of northward from that point. So it's pretty interesting how that happens, but it is a very, very common occurrence here with these winter storms. And we could see, similar areas impacted. I would say the only thing that's different is we don't get that same axis here that we saw in the European model. This one's definitely a lot more horizontal, as you can see, like I was talking about earlier, where we see, again, the heaviest snow area here. Have to kind of draw that again, but we can see it's pretty horizontal there, whereas I'll move us back to the European model here for the heart of that storm, and we see it's a lot more vertical, like I was mentioning earlier. I'll draw in the European model's kind of trajectory here, but it's a lot more kind of south to north there with that snowfall. So pretty interesting that we have those different axes going on. It's a slight detail, but certainly a piece of the puzzle for me. We get equally heavy snowfall here and equally low pressure. I think this is 1 millibar lower than the European model was showing. So obviously that's very, very close to the same thing. And then we get some colder air moving in. Again, another northeast snowstorm here around Friday the 16th. And then we get this kind of coastal threat, although the GFS model puts it way further south here. We're seeing this kind of cold, or better yet, the precipitation much further to the south. And again, the GFS model is known for pushing things way too far to the south. If you've been paying close attention to my videos here over the past few days, you would note that this model has been really too far south with things, and it eventually brings it further north to where the European model is showing it, or maybe they might meet in the middle. But regardless, the GFS model is almost always too far south, especially in this current pattern we're in. So wouldn't be surprised if it's a little too far south. The European model still has it further north than this, but it's still too far south to produce a major snowstorm. So maybe that's going to be the truth of it, but I still think this is way too far south versus what will likely happen. Now, we do get a brief warm-up here around like right after the 20th, but again, we get another cold infusion here. And note the jet stream. I mean, we were talking about that positive P&A. Look out west. I mean, very, very warm and dry pattern. I mean, we do have a storm here near the coast of California, but overall we have this warmth to work with, drier in most areas, more inland and to the north here. And this is going to provide, again, ample opportunities at cold and snow in the east, continued even after the 25th if this does verify. So definitely some things to feel promising about, even beyond our major snowstorm we're right on the doorstep of here. Now, total precipitation, I mean, over the past few days, something that I've noted is, I mean, we have pretty normal amounts here for the Northwest. You got to remember they average a lot up there. So this isn't anything too alarming. It is maybe slightly above average, but this isn't jumping off the screen. What is jumping off the screen is this kind of influx of precipitation and moisture into the deeper south and southeast, and even up into the mid-Atlantic and northeast. That is going to pose a real threat at snowfall, as we've noted throughout this video, and this is actually pretty far above average for what they do expect here during the winter months. As we take a look here at the total snowfall on the European model, again, tons out west, as they always see during this time of year. I'd be more shocked if there was less. But I want to zoom us into the northeast here because there is a lot to talk about in this corner of the nation, especially on the European model. You know, we get this pretty again, diagonal look where we're seeing, you know, West Virginia, Ohio getting involved, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and then southern New England. And we still have a bullseye somewhere around 10 to 15 inches set up somewhere in here, which is going to be a very, very major amount if that does occur. Again, I've talked about maybe more of like an 8 to 12 inch amount being closer to what we end up seeing as a bullseye, probably right around that 9 or 10 inch mark. Oftentimes these models do show a little bit of extra, and also this isn't accounting for any melting, it isn't accounting for any mixing. This is mostly just taking into account the pure snow that falls. It's thinking that it's all going to accumulate. That's the problem with some of these models, is it's not really considering any of those factors that also come into play, as we all know. So you can probably deduct a good, 2 to 4 inches from a lot of this. In general, unless you're in like the blues here where we would maybe deduct about a half an inch or an inch max, but it really just depends. Now also, as we move into, well, this is the European model again. I guess I didn't set it up correctly. So here's the GFS model. That's the 18Z. So let's take a look here at the 12Z, which, as you can see, by the way, it didn't change too much. This is the 18Z, then the 12Z, then the 18Z, then the 12Z. The only difference is we actually have the full 12Z run, so I can go ahead and show you that. As we take a look at the Northeast, again, it's a lot more horizontal here, as you can kind of notice. I mean, it's just pretty straight horizontal, actually, in axis. And we're seeing larger amounts here, 20 plus inches, Pennsylvania, New York here, also on this end of Pennsylvania and New York, right around, 15 inches plus at least. Again, I would probably deduct quite a bit off of this. I'm thinking, more in terms of about 10, 12 inches, as I mentioned earlier. I do think there is the possibility for 15 inches plus, but I think 2 feet is a little aggressive here for what we're currently expecting. But again, here's the difference of the European model. Again, notice the more diagonal look, and then the GFS model here with that more horizontal look. So the amounts and the storm intensity are pretty on par. We are seeing a little bit more here on the GFS model. The difference here now is the axis. Whereas yesterday, the issue was a massive, massive distance issue where the European model had it basically what both models are showing now. So the European model has done a great job so far. The GFS model had us seeing snowfall more over the southern mid-Atlantic and even into northern portions of the southeast. So the GFS model, again, proving to push things too far to the south. We've seen that trend if you watch yesterday's video to today's, where the GFS model has suddenly just taken it up to where the European model is. So the King Euro is definitely taken over here, as it tends to do, as it is statistically the best model in the world. A lot of people comment and they're like, why do you even use the GFS model if the European model is the best? And the problem is that, yes, the European model is the most correct model, like 7 out of 10 times, I would say. but there is that 3 out of 10 times where the GFS model is correct. And that's the only thing that keeps us, watching these other models, is the fact that there is just these, once every few systems, you'll see that these more inaccurate models actually just randomly end up being really, really accurate. So that's why when we're considering all possibilities, it is important to view each and every model and consider it a possibility. I get that question a lot, so I'm happy to answer that. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe, as we do upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload, so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.